I was 18 years old, and it was the last 2 days of high school. For us, fourth-year students, there were no more classes anymore because all the grades were finalized and closed by the subject teachers. So I was at home in the morning, and the telephone rang. So I went to the phone and picked it up. Hello? And it was the teacher who was in charge of my class. I don't know if there is such a thing in Brazil, but where I come from, in every school, there is a teacher who not only teach you a subject, but is almost like an aunt or an uncle for the entire class. So he or she makes sure that there are no absenteeism issues, that everybody's attending regularly, that if there is a conflict, they mediate and so on and so forth. And it was her. But she had never ever called in 4 years. And she said, Ákos, you may know that 2 of your classmates are going to fail the year, because each of them has a fail grade as the final closed grade in a separate subject. I knew. And she said, well, perhaps you don't know that there is such a thing as a teacher's council. And once all the grades are finalized and closed by the subject matter teachers, the council meets and they rubber stamp. They confirm all these finalized and closed grades. And very rarely, very, very rarely, sometimes they raise a grade that is a fail grade to the lowest pass grade. The chances are low, but sometimes they do it. You live really close to the school. Could you come in about an hour and address the teachers' council on behalf of the class, asking them to raise these 2 fail grades to pass grades? I thought about it a little and I said, sure, I'll come in. Now, I had to persuade. And she didn't give me any pointers, any guidance, any advice, what to do, how to do it, and so on. And it was one of the most difficult types of persuasion, because I had to turn a decision that was already made against my classmates into their favor. So on the way to the school, I was thinking, what on earth could I say? I was looking for some facts to support my argument. And I just couldn't find any. Why? Because the facts all spoke against them. Their poor grades during the entire semester. So I was there in front of the door about an hour after the call, and behind that door the teachers' council was meeting. And I still didn't have a plan. I had no idea what to do. And I thought to myself, I guess I'm going to have to improvise. So all of a sudden the door opened and they called me in. Took a deep breath and I stepped into the room. Now, fast forward 30 years to the present day. I have already been studying, practicing, teaching, consulting on persuasion in public speaking, in leadership situations, in sales, in any kind of business communication. Do you think I have ever heard somebody who didn't want to be more persuasive? I haven't. Has anybody here ever met someone who said, nah, I don't really want other people to do what I suggest them to? Anybody? No? We all want to be more persuasive. We all want to persuade our spouses, our children, our parents. We all want to persuade our peers, our teams, and our bosses. We want to persuade our clients, our customers, and our prospects. And persuasion is so important because we understand its value. It's key for success. Anybody who wants to make good money, not to say a lot of money, yeah, just a few hands? Okay, everybody's raising their hands. Somebody even 2 hands, yeah, and their feet. Right, so what is crucial for making big bucks? Forbes reported on an analysis of more than 17 million job listings in the United States, more than 17 million. And what they looked for was what are the most sought after, the most in demand soft skills that you need to make big bucks. What are the most sought after soft skills that you need to be in the top 25% of earners? Do you know what the first one was? The first one was strategic thinking. And more than 64% of these 17 million job listings said strategic thinking is crucial. The next one, negotiation skills. This is the percentage of the job listings that said it was important. The next one, persuasion. The next one, presentation skills. Do you see? 3 out of the 4 most sought after soft skills are related to persuasion. Because in presentations, very often we try to persuade. Negotiations, we very often try to persuade. So the question is, how good are you at persuading? If you want to make the big bucks, and not just that. So the key question that we're going to look at today is how to prevent what prevents you from persuading more effectively. And because we are at the Toastmasters Annual Conference, and Toastmasters is all about public speaking and leadership, we're going to look at what you can do when you speak in public, when you present, to be more effective, more persuasive. And finally, how can you be more persuasive in any kind of situation? Does it sound good? Yes, no, perhaps? I'll call a friend to ask. Okay, so let's start with what prevents you from persuading more effectively. Now, I'd like to start with a question. If you think that to persuade more effectively, you need to speak to the rational mind, please stand up. So if you want to speak to the rational mind to persuade, please stand up. I see a hand, perhaps a tired hand, but that's okay. Anybody else who agrees with it? No? Okay, a few more hands. Now, if you think that most of the time when you try to persuade, you're speaking to the emotional mind, then please stand up or raise your hand. Okay, a lot of hands. A lot of hands. Okay. Now, to help us dive into the depths of decision making, we're going to have the help of this gentleman here. Does anybody recognize him? Sorry? No, it's not Warren Buffett, not my grandfather, or perhaps next time I should put him on a slide. His name is Daniel Kahneman. And you may know him because he wrote the international bestseller entitled Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It sold millions and millions of copies. Now, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. And he was a psychologist. And in 2002, the Nobel Prize. Now, you may think, hang on, but there is no Nobel Prize for psychology. So what did he receive it for? He received it for economics. How come? Because what he showed the world was so important. It was how decisions are made, and that has such a huge impact on sales, on businesses, on markets, on stock markets, basically anything that's related to economics, that they gave him the Nobel Prize for economics. So what is it that he showed, that he proved? And it was also very groundbreaking, obviously, hence he got the prize. He said that when human beings decide, to simplify things a little bit, we typically use two decision-making mechanisms. One is system 1 and the other is system 2. Very innovative names for them, right? Okay, so I would like you to feel and understand what system 1 feels like, how it works. So I'm going to give you a couple of tasks. Ready? So the first task is I'm going to click and I'm going to give you something and you need to answer that question. What I'd like you to do is to shout out the answer. It doesn't matter if it's in English or Portuguese, that's fine. Just shout out the answer as quickly as you can, okay? So, ready? 2 plus 2. You are good at math. Okay, all right. The next one is not mathematical. The capital of France is? And you're also good at geography. Wow. Okay, all right. So what did you notice? System 1 is fast. You had the answer immediately. It's automatic. It also doesn't require any effort whatsoever. It uses very little energy, and we use it to make everyday decisions. Not big ones, everyday little decisions. And it can make mistakes. It can make mistakes. Are you ready to experience what System 2 looks like? Okay, here we go. System 2. Again, I'm going to give you a task. Shout out the answer as quickly as you can. Doesn't matter English or Portuguese. Ready? Okay. 13 times 25 square. I'm hearing laughter, but I'm not hearing any numbers. Well, the number is not really important. The point is the following. In order to give the answer to this, you need to use System 2. System 2 is not fast, it's slow. So it takes time, it takes effort, it's not automatic, it's intentional, it requires effort because you have to call up the system for multiplication and then apply it to these numbers, and if anybody interrupts you, you're going to lose it and you're going to have to start again, and so on and so forth. So it requires a lot of effort, a lot of focus, uses a lot more energy, and we use it for complex decisions, not everyday ones, but it doesn't make mistakes. So these are the two systems. Now, if you think that it's System 1 that makes most decisions, please stand up. Please stand up. It's a bit of movement, right? You've been sitting for, so if system 1 makes most of the decisions, stand up, okay? Wonderful. Okay. If you think, thank you very much, thank you, sit down. If you think system 2 makes most of the decisions, please stand up. Okay. All right, there was an undecided person saying, I don't know, perhaps. Okay? So, this is one of the key things that Daniel Kahneman showed. He said 90% of all decisions are made by system 1. 90% of all decisions. And actually, since then, he got the Nobel Prize in 2002, since then, this number has been corrected upwards to 95%. And there is growing evidence that it's 98, but we don't have enough to actually officially raise it to 98. So 95% of decisions are made by system 1. What is a system 1 type of decision? You are looking to buy something. It doesn't matter if it's a service or if it's a product. And you have different options. And of course, they come at different prices. So you look at them, and there is one that is more expensive, and you think, that's probably better quality. Why? Because often what is better quality is going to be more expensive. What is lower quality is going to be cheaper. But is it always like that? No. But you cut corners. This is what system 1 is about. It cuts corners in order to make good enough decisions. And if there are some mistakes, that's okay. The same goes if you again look at a number of products, and what you see is that one of them is made by a brand that you know and trust. Again, you're not going to analyze, perhaps there is a better brand for this particular thing, you're going to go for the one you trust and know. So this is system 1 thinking, system 1 decisions. Sometimes we make mistakes. Why is system 1 more dominant than system 2? The answer is energy. Energy. Why? Because your brain is about 1% of your body weight. And it uses about 20 to 25% of your energy. So it's small and very thirsty. And the brain simply cannot afford to use more energy. So I'm going to say something that may surprise you, but this is what neuroscientists have been saying. The main function of the brain, ladies and gentlemen, is not to think. I'm going to say it again. The main function of the brain is not to think. The main function of the brain is to keep us alive while using as little energy as possible. That's the function of the brain. So what does it do? It gives all the decisions it possibly can to system 1 because it uses less energy, it's automatic, it's faster, and so on. So my question is, if you want to persuade, which system do you need to talk to? System 1, exactly. System 1. System 1 is emotional. It's subconscious. It's subconscious. So then sometimes people say, yeah, okay, I understand. Okay, we make these emotional decisions. We make subconscious decisions. But when it comes to really important things, then we decide rationally. Do you? Let's look at a really big decision in any family's life. buying a house. Big enough? I would say so. So how does it usually start? The family sits down and they say, okay, let's see, how many rooms do we have? Or do we want? How many rooms do we want? Where do we want to live? In which part of the city? So that the schools are close, so that work is close, and so on. And let's define a budget. And then they call a real estate agent, and the real estate agent shows them a few properties. And then when they come back and tell their friends and family what happened, it's almost like a cliche. We saw that house and we fell in love with it, and yes, it was a little over our budget, but we just had to have it. So what happened? System to system to system to rational, rational, rational. At the point where you had to decide, bang, system one decided. Even in big things, in big decisions. That's how it works. And then sometimes people say, yeah, but in the business life, that's different. Do you have one brain that makes private decisions and another brain that makes business decisions? No, you don't. Unless you have two heads and you're Siamese twins or something, right? So system one runs the show, as Daniel Kahneman said. So the first question was, what prevents you from persuading more effectively? What prevents you from it, and most people, is that you are trying to persuade the rational mind and not the emotional mind. You are trying to speak to system 2, but it's system 1 that runs the show. Okay? So let's move on to the second question, which is how to be more persuasive in public speaking in presentation situations, which is the essence of one of the two essences of Toastmasters. The answer is very, very short. The answer is with a story. Why with a story? Because stories speak to the emotional subconscious brain. How? How does that work? Different stimuli reaches our brain through our senses, through what we see, what we hear, and so on and so forth. Now, if that stimuli has the potential, if it's shaped in a certain way, then it can raise certain hormones and neurotransmitters in the brain. Things like oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, and so on. And each of these is related to specific emotions and specific behaviors. So if your story is shaped in a way in which it can raise, for example, your level of, or the audience's level of oxytocin, what will happen? They will feel more connected to you, they will like you more, they will be more forgiving towards you, and they will be more likely to follow what you are suggesting them. Is that such a bad thing when you are trying to persuade? Not at all. This is exactly what you want. If, for example, you shape the story to raise your audience's dopamine level, what will happen? They will want to take action. They will be motivated to take action. They will be more focused, more motivated. Again, is it such a bad thing if you're trying to sell something? Not at all. Now, the question is, how does it really work in practice? Do I have the permission to raise your dopamine level? Yes? Okay, thank you. So, when I give training in storytelling, I like to play a specific game with the participants. I call the game one location, three objects. How does it go? I ask them to give me a location and an object. and I have to improvise the story on the spot without any preparation, and the story needs to take place at that location, and I need to include that object. And as soon as I say the word for that object, they need to give me the second word, and then I need to, again, shape the story, spin the story so that I include that object. And the same thing for the third one, and that's it. I actually saw this exercise from David J.P. Phillips. So I worked with a group in Sao Paulo, and they said, location, Mexico. Object, a woman's purse. And this is the story that I improvised on the spot for them. Toastmaster style, right? So, in Mexico, on a beach, it was a beautiful late summer, late afternoon. Anna was holding hands with her boyfriend, and they were walking slowly on the beach, enjoying the cool breeze, enjoying the fact that there were very few people there, and the sun was gradually sinking into the sea. And it was an idyllic, beautiful moment. But then something struck Anna. Something was different. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something was different. But she didn't want to spoil the moment, so she just went on not saying anything, and they keep chatting and hugging and walked. And in the distance, they saw a stand selling different souvenirs. So they walked up to the stand, and she saw a leather woman's purse that she liked very much. And at that moment, they gave me the second word, which was ring. So she liked the purse so much that she bought it. And then they kept walking hand in hand, and it struck her again. Something was different, but she didn't quite understand what it was. But it was disturbing. Not wanting to spoil the moment, they kept on walking. And by now they were standing on the edge of the ocean, where sea meets sand, and they were looking at this huge red, yellow, orange blue, the sun gradually sinking into the sea at the horizon. And then it struck her. She understood what it was. It was her boyfriend. He was different. So she turned quickly to her right, and he was not there. And she turned quickly to her left, and he was not there. Now let me ask you something. How would you feel if I stopped the story there? How would you feel? Impatient, is that what you said? Anxious? Anxious, wanting to know what's going to happen, right? Curious, exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, you are feeling dopamine. This is dopamine. You want to take action. This is what Netflix, and not just Netflix, uses all the time. Any series, towards the end of the episode, they ramp up the tension, they ramp up the suspense, and then it's the end of the episode. And just by accident, in the bottom right-hand corner, there is a small window which says next episode. And the numbers are ticking down. Right? So what do? They create dopamine in you, and they offer you to take the action they want you to take. This is what dopamine does to you. Now, how did I create dopamine? How did I increase the level of dopamine in your brains? Did you notice what I did? I painted, and after painting the background, I said, yes, there was something that wasn't quite right, and Anna couldn't understand. So I started creating curiosity. But I did not satisfy it immediately. I went on with the story. And after some time, again I added. She didn't understand what it was, but something was not quite right. I added more curiosity. But I didn't satisfy it. I only satisfied it at the very end. Why? Because dopamine halves, the level of dopamine halves in about 2 to 3 minutes. So I kept injecting dopamine strategically. Now, you might say, okay, this is all nice. You are playing around the game, one location, 3 objects, and all. Oh, by the way, are you interested in how the story ended? Because people often ask me, yeah, but what happened after she looked left and looked right and she couldn't see him? So she looked right and he wasn't there. And she looked left and he wasn't there. And then she turned around and there he was on one knee with a little box and the ring in his hand. So ring, second word. But the point is that, okay, this is not just a game. You can use this very effectively even when it comes to business presentations. I have a client, it's a global German company, based in Germany, but they are global. And first I gave training, then I gave a few keynotes for them, and they realized, oops, our presentations are losing out. Why? Because they started with lots of facts. This is the year our company was founded. This is what our annual revenue is. This is how many development sites we have all over the world. Is that going to make the audience go, yeah, this is fantastic, I want to buy what you're selling? No. So what we did, we changed it. I'm not saying that facts are bad. It's just that the way the brain reacts to facts is, basically, it says, thanks for telling me. And that's it. It just goes through the brain and it's gone. Unless that particular fact is really crucial for you for some reason, then you're going to remember it. Otherwise, and it's gone. What do stories do? Stories activate multiple brain centers. So, comparing the two, facts is like a shopping list. You're going to forget it quickly unless there was that particular chocolate cake that you're really interested in. And on the other hand, you have a bungee jump. You have an experience which you are going to remember much longer. That's the point. So what did we do with the German company? We moved towards the back and into other places in the presentation, the facts, and we added a story at the beginning, a strategically chosen story that uses oxytocin to create connection, that uses dopamine to move people towards action, to sell subtly without creating the appearance that you are selling. Do you know what the result was? When the salespeople started applying it, 3 months later they said, we had a meeting. Okay, so how did it go? What they said was, the clients and the prospects and the customers started leaning in more. They were more engaged. They were more curious about what we do. So it works. It works. Now, so the question to how to persuade in a presentation is the answer is clearly through stories. Our third question is how to persuade in any situation. When they asked Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, how to do that, he said, ask Dr. Robert Cialdini. Because Robert Cialdini has studied for over 40 years influence and persuasion. And he has written bestsellers like Influence and Persuasion. And he is really, they call him the Godfather of Influence. So if you remember the intro, I was trained by Robert Cialdini and his team how to do consultancy and training and so on in persuasion. So this is the connection. So what Robert Cialdini did was, he's a university professor, but he didn't do what most university professors do, which is conduct experiments inside the lab with students. That's not real life. He went out to the jungle, he went out into real life, and he took part in lots of sales to different things, used cars to whatever you wish. He also went in disguise to the US Army and to cults to see how they recruit people. And then he distilled everything to 7 universal principles of persuasion, which work in any language, any culture, because they are so deeply rooted in who we are as human beings. So we won't have time to go into each of them separately. I'll just give you an overview, and then we're going to zoom in on 2 or 3 a little bit to give you some idea how it works. So the first one that he talks about and defined is reciprocity. What is reciprocity? We all human beings are programmed that if we receive something from someone, we feel this internal need, this almost obligation to somehow reciprocate, give back. So if they have done good to us, we want to return the good. And you can use that strategically and ethically, because the whole thing about the Cialdini principles are how to use them ethically. The second principle is liking. What does liking mean? Liking means that when you like somebody, you are much more likely to look at them favorably, to decide in their favor, to be more tolerant towards them, and so on. Again, great for persuasion. How to use liking in an ethical way. The next one is unity. What does unity mean? While liking is this person is similar to us, unity is this person is one of us. So it's about belonging to the same group. I'll give you an example, going back to the German company. I go to Stuttgart, where they are based, for the first time to give training. And there is the lady who was the contact person on their side towards me, and we agreed to go for a walk, and whoever wants to come from the company on the afternoon. Nobody else came, just her, and there is a nice park almost like here, Parque da Cidade in the center. We go for a walk. And as we walk, after about 45 minutes, I somehow mentioned that, my birthday and how old I'm going to turn, and then it's in October. And she says, in October? Which day in October? I said, the 5th. I was born on the 5th of October. There is unity for you. So we both belong to this small group of people who were born on the 5th of October. What has she been doing? After the first projects and the second and the third, she's been selling me inside the company, even when they reduced the training budget. Because when we feel this unity with somebody, we try to help them. So this is unity. Then we have authority. What is authority about? When we don't know how to decide, because we're not experts in that particular field, what do? One of the things we do is we turn to people who we perceive as authority. So who we perceive as having the knowledge that is required to make the decision. So, if your car breaks down, God forbid, you're not going to go to a guy in a white coat, right? A doctor. You're going to go to a mechanic because he's an authority on that. But if you're not feeling well, you're going to go to the doctor because they have authority. And just the white coat already communicates authority, and the stethoscope and all that. Another thing we typically do when we don't know how to decide because we're not experts in the field is we look for social proof. I don't know how to decide, so what am I going to do? I'm going to look at what other people's, preferably other people, a lot of them, and preferably as similar to me as possible, did in a similar situation. And if it was good for them, probably it's going to be good for me as well, so I'm just going to follow. This is why when you go on Amazon or any online shop, you're going to see the star rating. And you're going to see the opinions of other people. And then we have consistency and commitment. What is that about? If I say that I don't eat sugar, which I haven't for over 4.5 years, and if my friends and family see me just munching on a cake, am I going to be consistent with what I committed myself to? Of course not. And what does that mean? It means that people will not trust me. Again, goes back to the roots of who we are as humans. If you cannot be trusted because you say one thing and you do another thing, you're not going to be a respected member of that society. So we can use that to persuade. And finally, there is scarcity. Scarcity is about if something is not available in large numbers or for a long time, its perceived value goes up immediately. Cupcakes, New York, a bakery. The bakery had to close after decades and decades of being very popular. They posted online, these are the last cupcakes that we have made. The cupcakes normally cost $3.50. Do you know how much people offered for those last cupcakes? $250 for a cupcake, just because it was scarce. Okay? So how does it work in practice? There was a US company that was acquiring and looking to acquire a lot of different other companies, smaller companies, and they were having meetings about them. And they weren't really happy with the number of meetings that were successful. So they called in some of my colleagues in the US, consultants, again of this type, and said, look, can you help us? Now, what the consultants noticed when they looked into it was the following. The negotiating team of that company usually came 5 to 10 minutes late for the meetings. And when they arrived, then the head of the negotiating team just said, well, we are very sorry we are late, we were in another meeting, and so let's get straight to the point. What did that mean? Late, being late, disrespect, at least in America. We were in another meeting, so there are other people who are more important than us. Not good. And they didn't allow time to use the principle of liking. What did the consultants suggest? 3 very small things, because when you know how decisions are made, then you can make very small changes to achieve really big results, because you go to the heart of the decision-making process. So they just said, please change 3 details. The first detail, you cannot be late, you have to be 5 to 10 minutes early. Why? Because that allows time for small talk. Second thing, I understand you're busy, but the secretary of the head of the negotiating team needs to research online the head of the other team and find 5 things that the head of the other team shares with the head of their team. It can be anything. Sport they like, food, whatever, where they live, whatever it is. And then this secretary, as the head of the negotiating team, his team is going to the meeting, she just needs to give this paper to the head of the team, and when they sit down, arriving 5 to 10 minutes early, the head of the team needs to choose one topic from that list of 5 and bring it up informally in the chit-chat they are having before they start the meeting. Do you know what happened? Typically, they started connecting and talking, and they found topics that they share, and because through the principle of liking, they started liking each other more. Very often they didn't stop when they were supposed to start negotiating. They went on 5, 10 minutes or 15 minutes longer. Sometimes the team had to tell them, hey, hang on, we are 15 minutes late. Okay, it's beautiful that you both like tennis and that you're talking about it, but let's now negotiate. And the percentage of failed negotiations went from 30 to 6. Small changes, big results. I'll give you another example. This is a more personal one. When you go, and I know this because one of the things I do is that I look at people's websites and evaluate them based on the principles of persuasion and advise them, consult how to make them more persuasive, to sell more, to convert. It's, making little steps to get the visitor to the required action. I do the same, by the way, when it comes to shops or any sales process. So I'm going to show you my website. You can't go there right now because we are changing it, so it's under construction. In about a week it will go live again. And I will give you 15 seconds, 10 seconds to have a look at it, and then I'm going to show you what are the persuasion principles used. This is the beginning, and it's basically all structured strategic persuasion. Okay, so here it is. So what is the first thing that you can see? Sorry? Okay. What is the first thing that you can see? Up here. The star rating, and based on how many reviews. Actually, since this screenshot was taken, it's above 1,600. Why is that there? Because it uses the principles of authority and social proof. If you put that, and we are talking specifically about a website, if you put that at the very beginning, that's one of the first things that the visitors will see. Everything else that comes later, in through the lens of social proof and authority. So it increases the chances of them doing what you want them to do. Okay? So, by the way, there is a reason, well, actually this is obviously based on real data, but there is the right range for the ranking. 4-point or 3-point or whatever is how many out of 5. 5 is not good. It's not good. Okay? So then, what else do you see? Obviously, you see the title and all that, but you also see in terms of the picture, you see me on stage. What does that build? Authority again. Then, there's a reason why there are 2 things to click on here, and so on. So it's basically, step by step, how you take the visitor to where you want them to click. So these are just 2 applications of social proof, authority, and liking. I could speak about this for the next week. I think we don't have that much time. But I'd like to open the floor now for some questions. Let's take 2 questions before we go to the closing part where I'm going to share some more useful pieces of information. Okay? So any questions that you might have, please ask. Yes, Duki.
When you put like how to hire your service in yellow, and the other is know more about your service, are those system 1 and system 2? That's what I do.
It's a really good question. I'm going to repeat it just because you weren't able to hear. So we're going to go back 1 slide. Oops. Here it is. So Duki's question was the following. Duki's question was the following. Why are there 2 options? So one is to see the services, the other is to find out about our services. Why are there 2 options? This is called Hobson plus 1. Hobson plus 1. Why? What is it about? If you just offer 1 option, which would be to click on the button, then what is the alternative to that? If they don't click, they can leave. But this Hobson plus one means that you offer one option and you offer an alternative, because by doing so you greatly diminish the chance of the visitor leaving, and they're going to more likely stay on the page. Okay? Any other? Oh, there's the question. Okay. You're going to get a microphone in a second. Yes, please.
I'm really loud. Would I be correct in thinking that the Dr. Kahneman's concept of the 95%, the quick thinking, is analogous to the concept that Malcolm Gladwell introduced called thin slicing? Are you familiar with that concept?
I'm not in great detail. I've only read it very quickly. Can you tell us very briefly what thin slicing is about?
A lot of what you described is just making those instantaneous decisions that save energy and are good enough decisions. They may not be perfect, but they're good enough. So
That's
okay.
it. That's it.
Same idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here, a question there. Somebody raised their hands before, and then we're going to come to you, Pamela, and then we're going to move on. Okay, so there was a hand, I think, somewhere there before. Okay, there it is.
Hello, my name is Arling. I would love to hear about you about non-verbal communication and how can we use it to be more persuasive in negotiation, in presentations.
Okay. I could actually talk about this for an hour and a half. I'm not going to give you that answer. I'm going to give you the short answer, the 3-minute answer. Again, non-verbal communication goes back to the roots of who we are. And one of the things you want to achieve with non-verbal communication is to build trust, because the trust is the basis of every decision in your favor, be that negotiations or anything else that you mentioned. How do you do that? You do it by using open palm hand gestures. That doesn't mean, look, my hand, I have open palms, I'm hiding nothing. It can be like this, but they need to see that the hands are open. Why? Because back millions and millions of years ago, for a very long time, if somebody wanted to harm us, what they would do is they would have something in their hand. They would have a stone, they would have a stick, they would have a knife, they would have something. And people often don't feel comfortable even if you put your hands behind your back because they can't see. But if you gesticulate like this, open hands and so on, then you are building trust. Basically you're saying, look, I am not a threat. That's one thing. There are multiple other things, but we only have the shorter version. Okay, and Pamela asked the question. Yes, please. I'm just checking if I understood correctly. The question was about whether it's ethical to use these decision hooks or not. Okay, it's a very good question. I always get that question. This is the answer. Typically, people think about using persuasion in any shape or form as there is one situation when you are not using persuasion, and then by not using persuasion, you are just letting the other person's brain decide based on the merits of your proposal. And I see some nodding. And then comes persuasion. Now you're using persuasion techniques, and you are sort of nudging, pushing the person towards the decision that you want them to take. And that's a false dichotomy. Why is it a false dichotomy? Do you remember 95% of the brain, of decisions are made emotionally? I'll give you another very interesting study. They took a functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, they're one of those big tubes, and they slide you in, and they can see in real life, there are magnets and they make horrible noise, but they can see in real life what is happening inside your body. And do you know what they saw about decisions? That the subconscious decision-making mechanisms, the subconscious parts of the body became active 7 seconds before the conscious parts of the brain. What does that mean? It means that we decide subconsciously first, and then our brain justifies that decision to ourselves on a rational level. The brain justifies on the rational level the decision that was made emotionally. So we have the impression that we decide rationally, but no. So why is not using persuasion techniques, being very clean and ethical, and using persuasion techniques perhaps not being clean and ethical? Why is that a false dichotomy? It's a false dichotomy because the brain, 95% or more of the time, will decide based on whatever information you give them. And it will decide emotionally. So it's not that if you don't use persuasion techniques, the brain is going to decide completely rationally. Absolutely not. It looks all the time to decide emotionally, to delegate decisions to system one. So it's going to decide emotionally no matter whether you apply persuasion techniques or you don't. This is one thing. The second thing is the following. As I said in the Cialdini Institute, a huge emphasis is put on the ethical use of persuasion. What does that mean? Persuasion is a tool. It's not, persuasion by itself is not good or bad. It's the tool, and every tool can be used well and badly. Take a knife. You can cut up food with a knife and you can feed some hungry people. In my book, that's very good. Or you can try to hurt somebody with that same knife. In my book, that's very bad. So it's not the tool, but how we use it that is ethical or not. If you are trying to sell a bad product that you know is bad, that you know will not help the client, then you are not using the tool ethically. But sometimes, and actually quite often, exactly because 95% of decisions are made emotionally, and if you don't communicate the value of what you are selling in a way that the client's brain will decide to it, even though they may need that help, they may need that product or service you're selling, they would benefit from it, they're not going to buy it. Because what you communicated didn't really resonate with their subconscious decision-making machines. That's it. Sorry, not machines, mechanisms. That's it. Okay? So, questions. These were questions. Now, let's move on to... Yes? Microphone's good? Now it's good? Okay, all right, thank you. So, I was standing in front of the door behind which the Teachers' Council was meeting. I still hadn't figured out what I'm going to say. I didn't have any facts, any factual arguments in my favor. I thought to myself, I'm going to have to improvise. All of a sudden, the door opened and they called me in. I took a deep breath and I stepped into the room. I greeted everybody politely and I said the following. We are about to reach a very important milestone in our lives. We are about to graduate from high school. Two of my classmates don't have pass grades. We are about to go out into life, to go to university, to create a life, to create a career for ourselves. They may stay behind. I know that school is very important. Perhaps there are some other things in life that are more important. It's up to you to decide. And that was it. I left. I didn't know what they decided until 2 days later. And then I found out that both of them graduated. Did I know what I was doing? I had no idea. It was pure luck, as it very often is for most people when they try to persuade. I just hit the jackpot because I didn't have any facts. I wanted to use facts. I didn't have any facts, so I had to go for emotion. I very briefly told an indirect story. And without knowing, I used some of the Cialdini persuasion principles. It went well. But I would like to leave you with a quote and a question. The quote comes from a very well-known Austrian philosopher. His name is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he said, "Nobody has gained muscle by watching me work out." What does that mean? Having the knowledge is nice, but it's not going to get you anywhere unless you apply it. Now you have gained some insights as to how to persuade. The question is, how are you going to apply it? Thank you.